Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're standing in a pitch-black room. Your heart is racing. You hear breathing, but you can't tell if it's yours or something else's. Now, imagine you whisper your terror's name out loud in that darkness. And the moment you do, a door you didn't know existed opens, and sunlight pours through. That's not poetry. That's the law of inner light. The act of naming your fear, speaking directly to it, doesn't make it grow stronger. It dissolves it. Because fear cannot exist in the presence of conscious awareness. It only survives in silence. You see, most people spend their entire lives running from that dark room. They try to pretend it doesn't exist. They distract themselves with work, with noise, with constant motion, hoping that if they just stay busy enough, the darkness won't catch up to them. But it always does, doesn't it? It shows up at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. It shows up in your chest when you're about to take a risk. It shows up as that voice in your head that says, "You're not good enough, you're not ready, you're going to fail." And here's what nobody tells you: that voice, that fear, that darkness, it's been waiting for you to turn around and face it. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it needs you to finally see what it really is. Today, I'm going to share something with you that changed my understanding of fear completely. This isn't going to be another motivational speech telling you to be brave or push through your anxiety. I'm not going to give you platitudes about courage or positive thinking. What I'm going to show you is a fundamental law of consciousness that, once you understand it, will transform your relationship with fear forever. And it starts with something so simple, so obvious, that most people miss it entirely. The secret is this: your fear isn't your enemy. It's a conversation you've been avoiding. And the moment you're willing to have that conversation, everything changes. Now I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, "Joseph, you don't understand my fear. My fear is real. It has consequences. It's not just some mental game I can think my way out of." And you're absolutely right. Your fear does feel real. It produces real sensations in your body: the tight chest, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, the spinning thoughts. It creates real consequences in your life. The opportunities you don't take, the relationships you sabotage, the dreams you abandon before you even try. I'm not here to tell you that your fear is imaginary or that you're making it up. What I am here to tell you is that your fear is not what you think it is. And understanding the difference between what fear feels like and what fear actually is, that's where your freedom lives. Let me explain what I mean. See, most of us have been taught to think about fear as a thing, as an object, an entity, a force that exists outside of us and attacks us. We say things like "fear gripped me," or "fear took over," or "I was paralyzed by fear," as if fear is something separate from us, something with its own power and agency. But that's not how it works. Fear isn't a thing. Fear is a process. It's a pattern of thinking that has become so automatic, so deeply grooved into your nervous system, that it feels like it's just happening to you. But it's not happening to you. It's happening through you. And that distinction is everything. Think about it this way. When you're afraid, what's actually happening? You're having a conversation with yourself. You're telling yourself a story about what might happen, what could go wrong, what you might lose. And that story triggers a physical response in your body because your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between something that's really happening right now and something you're vividly imagining. Your nervous system responds to the story you're telling it. So if you're telling yourself a story about disaster, danger, and doom, your body prepares for disaster, danger, and doom. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Your breathing becomes shallow. Stress hormones flood your system, and all of that feels very, very real. But here's the key. It's a response to a story, not to reality. To the story you're telling about reality. Now, this is where most people get stuck. Because once that story gets going, and once that physical response kicks in, it creates a feedback loop. The fear thoughts make your body feel afraid. The physical sensations of fear make the thoughts seem more believable. The believable thoughts intensify the physical sensations, and around you go, spiraling deeper into anxiety, into panic, into paralysis. And the whole time you're convinced that this is just how things are. This is just who you are. You're an anxious person. You're a fearful person. This is your burden to carry. But what if I told you that you could interrupt that loop? What if I told you that there's a way to step outside of that cycle completely, not by fighting it, not by forcing yourself to be brave, but by doing something so counterintuitive, so unexpected, that it short-circuits the entire mechanism? What if I told you that the way out isn't through suppression or distraction or willpower, it's through dialogue? This is what I've discovered in my years of studying the mind and working with people who are struggling with fear, anxiety, and self-doubt. The moment you're willing to speak directly to your fear, not about it, not around it, but to it, something profound happens. You activate what I call the law of inner light. And this law states that whatever you bring into conscious awareness loses its power to control you unconsciously. Fear can only terrorize you when it operates in the shadows, when it runs on autopilot, when you're not paying attention to it. But the moment you shine the light of your conscious attention directly onto it, the moment you name it and address it and engage with it, as if it's something you can observe rather than something you are in that moment, you reclaim your power. Now, I want to be very clear about what I mean by speaking to your fear. I'm not talking about positive affirmations. I'm not talking about repeating mantras or trying to convince yourself that everything's fine when it's not. I'm talking about genuine dialogue. I'm talking about treating your fear as if it's a voice in a conversation that you're willing to listen to, not because the fear is right, not because you're going to obey it, but because as long as that voice is unheard, as long as it's operating in the background without your conscious acknowledgement, it will continue to run your life. Think about how this works in human relationships. If someone in your life is upset with you but they won't tell you why, what happens? The tension builds. You sense something's wrong. You start guessing, assuming, filling in the blanks with your own worst-case scenarios. And the longer that person stays silent, the more power that silence has over you. But the moment they finally speak up and tell you what's bothering them, even if it's difficult to hear, at least you know, at least it's out in the open, at least you can deal with it. The same principle applies to your inner life. The fears that you refuse to acknowledge, the anxieties you try to push away, the doubts you pretend aren't there, those are the ones that have the most power over you, because they're operating in secret, they're pulling strings in the background. And you can't negotiate with something you won't acknowledge exists. So, the first step in applying the law of inner light is simply this: stop pretending your fear isn't there. Stop trying to be strong by ignoring it. Stop thinking that if you just don't think about it, it will go away. It won't. It will fester. It will grow. It will find 1,000 different ways to sabotage you from the shadows. But if you're willing to turn toward it, if you're willing to say out loud, "I see you. I know you're here. And I'm willing to listen," that simple act of acknowledgement begins to shift the entire dynamic. Now let me tell you a story that illustrates this principle in action. There was a man I knew, and for the sake of this story, let's call him David. David was drowning. Not literally, but financially and emotionally. He had been a successful businessman. Someone who had built a thriving company from the ground up. Someone who had always been good with money, good with planning, good with seeing opportunities and seizing them. But then, a series of events happened that were beyond his control. A major client went bankrupt and couldn't pay him what they owed. A business partner made some decisions without consulting him that put the company in a terrible position. And then the economy shifted, and suddenly the market that had been so reliable just dried up. Within the span of about 18 months, David went from financial security to drowning in debt. And I don't mean a little bit of debt. I mean the kind of debt that keeps you awake at night, that makes you afraid to check your bank account, that makes you feel like the walls are closing in, and David was terrified. Every night, like clockwork, he would wake up at 3 a.m. with his heart pounding, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. He would lie there in the dark, replaying all the mistakes he'd made, all the things he should have done differently, imagining himself losing his house, losing everything he'd worked for, becoming a cautionary tale. And during the day, he would put on a brave face. He would tell his wife everything was going to be fine. He would show up to meetings and pretend he had it all under control. But inside, he was falling apart. The fear was consuming him. It was affecting his sleep, his health, his ability to think clearly and make decisions. He was so paralyzed by anxiety that he couldn't even take the steps he needed to take to actually improve his situation. He was stuck. One night, after waking up in that familiar panic at 3 a.m., something different happened. Instead of lying there replaying his fears silently in his head, instead of trying to push the thoughts away or distract himself, David sat up in bed. And he did something he'd never done before. He spoke out loud. In the darkness of his bedroom, with his wife sleeping beside him, he whispered, "Fear, I know you're here. I feel you. And I'm listening. What are you trying to tell me?" Now, he told me later that he felt absolutely ridiculous doing this. He felt like he was losing his mind, talking to his fear as if it were a person in the room with him. But he was so desperate, so exhausted from running, that he was willing to try anything. So he sat there in the silence, waiting. And at first nothing happened. Just more silence. Just the sound of his own breathing. But then, slowly, something started to shift. He started to notice that the fear wasn't just saying, "You're going to lose everything." There was something underneath that. Something deeper. And as he sat there, genuinely listening, genuinely open to whatever needed to come up, he began to hear another voice. A much older voice. His father's voice. David's father had been a hard man. A man who believed that success was everything, that your worth as a human being was measured by how much money you made, how impressive your career was, how much you could achieve. And David had spent his entire life trying to prove himself to his father, trying to earn his approval, trying to be successful enough to finally hear his father say, "I'm proud of you." But his father had passed away years earlier, and those words had never come. And now, sitting in the darkness, David realized something that broke his heart and freed him at the same time. The fear wasn't really about money. The money situation was real, yes. The debt was real. The financial pressure was real. But the terror, the panic, the sense that if he failed financially he would cease to exist as a person, that wasn't about money. That was about his father's voice, still echoing in his head after all these years, telling him that if he wasn't successful, he was worthless. Once David saw that, once he made that connection, something extraordinary happened. The fear didn't disappear immediately. The debt didn't magically vanish, but the relationship to the fear changed completely. He could suddenly see it clearly. He could see that he was carrying a belief system that didn't even belong to him. He was operating from a set of rules about success and failure that his father had given him, rules that equated financial achievement with human value. And he could finally ask himself, is that true? Is my worth really determined by my bank account? Is that actually what I believe? Or is that just a program I've been running unconsciously? And once he asked those questions, once he brought conscious awareness to the real source of his terror, he could address it. He could speak to it. He could say, "Dad, I know you did the best you could. I know you were trying to motivate me, to push me to succeed, but I don't need to carry this anymore. My worth isn't determined by my financial status. I am valuable because I exist. Period." And then he could turn his attention to the actual problem in front of him, the debt, the financial situation, without the paralyzing fear. He could think clearly, he could make decisions, he could take action. Within 6 months, David's financial situation had stabilized. Not because of magic, not because speaking to his fear suddenly made money appear, but because he was no longer paralyzed. He was no longer spending all his energy running from the fear or being consumed by it. He could focus that energy on actual problem solving. He renegotiated payment plans with creditors. He found new clients. He made some hard decisions about cutting expenses. And through all of it, the 3 a.m. panic attacks stopped. Not because his life became perfect, but because he had changed his relationship with fear. He had discovered that fear could be met, could be spoken to, could be understood. And that changed everything. Now, I tell you this story not because I want you to believe that all your fears are about your parents or your childhood. That's not the point. The point is this: your fear is always trying to tell you something. It's always pointing to something underneath the surface, something that needs to be seen, something that needs to be brought into the light. And as long as you treat fear as the enemy, as something to be fought or suppressed or overcome through sheer force of will, you miss the message. You stay stuck in the loop. But when you're willing to engage with it, when you're willing to say, "Okay, fear, I'm listening. What do you need me to know?" That's when transformation becomes possible. Let me give you another way to think about this. Imagine you're walking through a forest at dusk. The sun is setting, and the shadows are getting longer. You're walking along a path, and suddenly you see something out of the corner of your eye. A shape, a figure, something large and dark moving between the trees. Your heart starts to race. Your mind immediately goes to the worst possibility. It's a bear, it's a wolf, it's something dangerous. And so you start to move faster. You start to run. And as you run, you keep looking back over your shoulder, and every time you look, that shape is still there. It's following you. It's keeping pace with you. It's getting closer. And the more you run, the more terrified you become, until you're absolutely convinced that you're being hunted, that you're in mortal danger, that you need to escape or you're going to die. Finally, you're so exhausted you can't run anymore. You collapse on the ground, gasping for breath, your heart pounding so hard you think it might explode. And in that moment of complete surrender, in that moment when you've given up trying to escape, you do something you haven't done this entire time. You turn around, you look directly at the thing that's been chasing you, and you call out, "What do you want from me?" And there's silence. Nothing moves. Nothing responds. And slowly, very slowly, you reach into your pack, and you pull out a lantern. Your hands are shaking, but you manage to light it. And the moment you hold that lantern up, the moment light floods the space around you, you see the truth. There's no bear. There's no wolf. There's no monster at all. What you were seeing, what you were running from, was your own shadow. The setting sun was casting it at just the right angle, magnifying it, distorting it, making it look like something it wasn't. The monster was never chasing you. It was never separate from you. It was cast by you. And the moment you brought light to it, the moment you turned around and looked directly at it with conscious awareness, it disappeared. Not because you fought it, not because you were brave enough or strong enough, but simply because shadows cannot exist in direct light. That's not a matter of courage. It's a matter of physics. This is the law of inner light. Your fear is like that shadow. It seems huge. It seems powerful. It seems like it has its own existence, its own agency, its own ability to hunt you down and destroy you. But it doesn't. It's a projection. It's cast by you, by the light of your own consciousness interacting with unexamined thoughts, with old beliefs, with stories you've been telling yourself for so long that they've become invisible. And the moment you're willing to turn around and shine your awareness directly on it, the moment you're willing to bring light to the darkness, the fear loses its monstrous appearance. It doesn't become less real, in terms of the sensations you feel, or the thoughts you have, but it becomes workable. It becomes something you can see clearly, something you can understand, something you can respond to rather than just react to. This is why fighting fear doesn't work. Because when you fight something, you're reinforcing the belief that it's real, that it's separate from you, that it has power over you. You're still operating from the assumption that there's a monster in the forest. You're just trying to be brave enough to face it. But that's not what's needed. What's needed is light. What's needed is awareness. What's needed is the willingness to see what's actually there instead of what you're afraid might be there. And this is where most self-help advice goes wrong. It tells you to feel the fear and do it anyway, to push through, to be courageous, to overcome. And listen, I'm not saying courage doesn't have its place. I'm not saying action isn't important. But if you try to act while you're still in the grip of unconscious fear, while you're still running from the shadow, you're not acting from a place of clarity. You're acting from a place of reaction. And reactive action tends to create more problems than it solves. It's like trying to fight your own shadow. You can swing at it all day long, and you'll just exhaust yourself. The shadow doesn't care. It's not real in the way you think it is. So instead of trying to overcome fear, instead of trying to be brave enough or strong enough or positive enough, I'm inviting you to try something radically different. I'm inviting you to have a conversation with your fear. I'm inviting you to treat it not as an enemy to be defeated but as a confused messenger carrying outdated information. Because that's what it is. Your fear is trying to protect you. That's its job. That's what it was designed to do. The problem is, it's using a very old, very primitive part of your brain to do that job. And that part of your brain, the amygdala, the fight or flight response system, it doesn't have access to nuance or context or reason. It just has one question. Is this safe, or is this dangerous? And it answers that question based on pattern recognition, based on past experiences, based on associations that were formed when you were very young, and that may or may not be relevant to your current situation. So when your fear tells you, don't take that risk, you'll fail, what it's really saying is, the last time we tried something like this, something bad happened, and I don't want that to happen again. It's trying to keep you safe. But it's using information from 5 years ago, or 15 years ago, or from your mother's experience, or from your grandfather's trauma that got passed down through the family line and encoded in your nervous system. The fear is operating on outdated software. And until you're willing to look at that software, until you're willing to examine it and question it and update it, it will keep running the same programs over and over again. This is the gift of bringing conscious awareness to fear. Consciousness is like a software update. It allows you to look at the programs that are running in the background and ask, is this still true? Is this still relevant? Is this actually keeping me safe? Or is it keeping me stuck? And once you ask those questions, once you examine the fear, instead of just obeying it or fighting it, you can make a choice. You can decide whether this particular fear is giving you useful information, or whether it's just noise, just static, just an old recording playing on repeat. Let me give you an example from my own life. There was a period many years ago when I was terrified of public speaking. I had been asked to give a lecture on some of the principles I'd been studying and teaching, and the moment I agreed to do it, I was filled with dread. I would lie awake at night imagining myself standing in front of all those people, forgetting what I was going to say, stumbling over my words, making a fool of myself. I could feel the heat of embarrassment rising in my body just thinking about it. And my first instinct was to back out, to make an excuse, to say I was too busy or not qualified, or whatever story I could come up with to avoid facing that fear. But I had been studying these principles. I had been teaching others about the power of the subconscious mind and the importance of facing what we're afraid of. And I realized I would be a hypocrite if I didn't apply what I was teaching to my own life. So instead of backing out, I decided to try something different. One evening, I sat alone in my study, and I spoke out loud to my fear of public speaking. I said, "Fear, I know you're here. I feel you every time I think about that lecture. And I want to understand you. Why are you so afraid? What are you trying to protect me from?" And at first I felt foolish, just like David did. I felt like I was play acting, like I was pretending there was someone else in the room. But I stayed with it. I sat in the silence and I waited. And gradually, a memory surfaced. I was 12 years old, standing in front of my class, giving a presentation on a book I was supposed to have read. But I hadn't read it. I had skimmed it the night before and tried to fake my way through. And the teacher saw right through me. She called me out in front of everyone, told me I was unprepared, embarrassed me in front of my peers. And I remembered the burning shame of that moment, the feeling of being exposed as a fraud, the laughter of the other kids. That memory had been buried for decades. I hadn't thought about it in years. But it was still there, still active, still influencing my nervous system every time I thought about speaking in public. Once I saw that connection, once I understood that my fear of public speaking wasn't really about public speaking at all, it was about that 12-year-old boy who was ashamed and humiliated. I could speak to it differently. I could say, "I see you. I understand why you're afraid. You don't want me to be humiliated like that again. You're trying to protect me from shame. And I appreciate that. But here's what you need to know. I'm not 12 anymore. I'm not unprepared. I've studied this material for years. I know what I'm talking about. And even if I do make a mistake, even if I stumble over my words, That doesn't mean I'm a fraud. It means I'm human. And the people who are coming to hear me, they're not coming to judge me. They're coming to learn something that might help them. So I'm going to do this. And you can come along for the ride if you need to. But you're not in charge anymore. And something shifted. The fear didn't vanish completely. I still felt nervous when I stepped up to give that lecture. My hands still trembled a little. My heart still beat fast. But it wasn't the same paralyzing terror. It was a normal, human nervousness that actually helped me stay sharp and focused. And the lecture went well. Not because I conquered my fear through willpower, but because I changed my relationship with it. I brought it into the light. I understood where it was coming from, and that understanding freed me. This is what I mean by the law of inner light. Light doesn't fight darkness. It doesn't argue with it or try to push it away. It simply reveals what was hidden, and once something is revealed, once you can see it clearly, it loses its power to control you from the shadows. You can work with it. You can respond to it intelligently instead of just reacting to it blindly. Now, I want to talk about why this practice of speaking to your fear is so powerful, and why it works in a way that other approaches don't. There's a principle in psychology called affect labeling. It's a fancy term for a simple idea. When you name an emotion out loud, when you put words to what you're feeling, it actually changes the way your brain processes that emotion. Studies have shown that when people label their fear or anxiety verbally, there's a measurable decrease in the activity of the amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for the fear response. At the same time, there's an increase in activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking, decision-making, and emotional regulation. What this means in practical terms is that the simple act of saying, "I am afraid," or "This is anxiety I'm feeling," literally helps your brain shift from reactive mode to responsive mode. It's like flipping a switch. The emotional part of your brain calms down slightly, and the thinking part of your brain comes online more fully, and that's just from labeling the emotion in your head. When you speak it out loud, when you engage your voice, your breath, your body in the process, the effect is even stronger, because now you're not just thinking about the fear, you're externalizing it. You're making it an object that you can observe rather than a state that you're lost in. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Most people, when they label their emotions, they do it silently. They think to themselves, "I'm feeling anxious right now," and maybe that helps a little bit. But when you speak to the fear out loud, when you address it directly as if it's another presence in the room, you're doing something psychologically and spiritually profound. You're creating separation. You're establishing that you are not your fear. You are the one who's aware of the fear. You are the one who can observe it, name it, question it. And that distinction, that gap between the feeler and the feeling, between the observer and the observed, that's where your freedom lives. This is an ancient spiritual principle that's been taught in different ways across different traditions for thousands of years. In the East, they call it witnessing consciousness, the ability to step back and watch your thoughts and emotions without being completely identified with them. In the West, we might call it meta-awareness or mindfulness. But whatever you call it, the principle is the same. When you can observe something, you are not that thing. When you can watch your fear, you are not your fear. You are something larger, something deeper, something that contains the fear but is not limited by it. And this is why speaking to your fear out loud is so powerful. Because it forces you to take that observer position. It's very difficult to talk to something and simultaneously believe that you are that thing. If you're having a conversation with your fear, then by definition, you are not the fear. You are the one doing the talking. The fear is the one being spoken to. And that simple shift in perspective, that simple act of externalizing what has been internal, can be absolutely transformative. Now, let me address something that might be coming up for some of you right now. You might be thinking, "But Joseph, if I speak to my fear, if I acknowledge it, won't that give it more power? Won't that make it more real? Aren't I supposed to just ignore negative thoughts and focus on the positive?" And I understand why you might think that. There's been a lot of teaching in the personal development world about the power of positive thinking, about the importance of focusing on what you want rather than what you fear, about not giving energy to negative thoughts. And there's truth in those teachings. Where you put your attention does matter. What you focus on does tend to expand in your experience. But here's the subtle distinction that makes all the difference. There's a difference between dwelling on your fear and bringing awareness to your fear. Dwelling on fear means getting lost in it, ruminating on it, replaying worst-case scenarios over and over, letting the fear thoughts spin in your mind unchecked and unconsciously. That absolutely does make the fear worse. That feeds it. That strengthens the neural pathways associated with anxiety. But bringing awareness to fear is something completely different. Bringing awareness means stepping back, observing, naming, questioning. It means shining the light of consciousness on the fear so you can see it clearly instead of being haunted by it in the dark. Think of it this way. If you have a wound on your body, you have two choices. You can ignore it, cover it up, pretend it's not there, and hope it heals on its own. And sometimes, for minor wounds, that works. But for deeper wounds, for infected wounds, for wounds that need attention, ignoring them doesn't make them go away. It makes them worse. They fester. They spread. They become more painful. Or you can choose to examine the wound. You can look at it directly, clean it out even though that might be uncomfortable, treat it properly, and give it what it needs to heal. And yes, that requires looking at something that's not pretty. That requires acknowledging pain. But that acknowledgement doesn't make the wound worse. It's the first step toward healing. The same is true with emotional and psychological wounds. The fears, anxieties, and traumas that you refuse to look at don't go away just because you're not thinking about them consciously. They go underground. They operate in your subconscious. They influence your behavior in ways you're not aware of. They sabotage you from behind the scenes. But when you're willing to bring them into the light, when you're willing to examine them with conscious awareness, you begin the healing process. And that's not giving power to the fear. That's reclaiming your power from the fear. So when I talk about speaking to your fear, I'm not talking about obsessing over it. I'm not talking about spending hours every day analyzing your anxiety. I'm talking about a deliberate, conscious practice of acknowledgement and dialogue. You set aside a specific time. You create a container for this work. You say, "Okay, fear, I'm giving you 10 minutes of my full attention. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. I'm going to understand where you're coming from. And then I'm going to move forward with my day from a place of clarity, rather than confusion." That's not dwelling. That's healing. And here's what's beautiful about this practice. Once you've done it, once you've actually sat down and spoken to your fear and heard what it has to say and responded to it with compassion and clarity, the fear loses its ability to ambush you throughout the day. Because you've already given it space. You've already heard its message. You've already addressed it. So when it tries to pop up while you're in the middle of doing something else, you can simply say, "I hear you. We already talked about this. I've got this." And you can redirect your attention to what you're actually doing. But if you've never given the fear conscious attention, if you've been trying to suppress it or ignore it, then it will keep demanding attention. It will keep interrupting you. It will keep pulling focus. Because it needs to be heard. This is why people who try to use positive thinking alone, without doing the deeper work of examining their fears, often find that it doesn't stick. They can repeat affirmations all day long. They can visualize success. They can focus on gratitude and abundance. And all of that is valuable. But, if there's an unexamined fear running in the background, contradicting those affirmations, undermining those visualizations, that fear will win. Because the subconscious is more powerful than the conscious mind when it comes to directing behavior. And the subconscious responds to what's unresolved, what's unhealed, what's calling out for attention. So the work I'm inviting you into isn't separate from positive thinking, or visualization or any other practice you might be using. It's foundational to those practices. It's the clearing work that makes those practices actually effective. You're not replacing positive focus with fear focus. You're bringing awareness to the fear so that your positive focus can actually take root. You're pulling the weeds so the garden can grow. Now, let me walk you through exactly how to do this practice. I want to give you a clear, simple structure that you can use today, right now, as soon as we're done here. Because this isn't theoretical. This isn't just philosophy. This is a practical tool that produces real results when you actually use it. The first thing you need to do is create what I call a container. This is a specific time and space where you're going to do this work. You can't do this practice while you're driving to work, or scrolling through your phone, or in the middle of a conversation with someone. You need to be alone. You need to be in a place where you can speak out loud without feeling self-conscious or being interrupted. For some people, that's a bedroom with the door closed. For others, it's sitting in their car in an empty parking lot. For others, it's a walk in nature where no one else is around. The specific location doesn't matter. What matters is that it's private and quiet, and you feel safe enough to be vulnerable and honest. Once you have your space, take a moment to settle yourself. I'm not talking about trying to calm down or relax or get into some special meditative state. I'm talking about simply becoming present. Take 3 deep breaths. Feel your body in the chair or on the ground. Notice the sounds around you. Bring your awareness into this moment, right here, right now. This is important because you're about to engage with your subconscious mind, and your subconscious responds to deliberate, focused attention. If you're scattered, if you're distracted, if half your mind is thinking about what you need to do later, this practice won't work as well. So give yourself 30 seconds to arrive. That's all you need. Just arrive fully in this moment. Now comes the most important part. You're going to name the fear. You're going to speak directly to it using second-person language. This is crucial. You don't say, "I'm afraid of failure." That keeps you identified with the fear. Instead you say, "Fear of failure, I know you're here." You're addressing the fear as if it's separate from you, as if it's another voice in the room that you're willing to listen to. And you want to be as specific as possible with the naming. Don't just say, "Fear, I'm talking to you." That's too vague. Your subconscious mind responds to specificity. So, if you're afraid of failing at your new business venture, say that. "Fear of failing at my business, I'm talking to you right now." If you're afraid of being rejected in relationships, say that. "Fear of rejection, I see you." If you're afraid of being alone, afraid of being judged, afraid of not being enough, whatever it is, name it clearly and directly. Now, here's where people sometimes get stuck. They say, "But Joseph, I don't know what I'm afraid of. I just feel anxious all the time, but I can't put my finger on what it's about." And if that's you, that's okay. Start with what you know. Start with the feeling. You can say, "Anxiety, I feel you in my chest right now. I feel you in my racing thoughts. I don't understand you yet, but I'm willing to listen," and then see what comes. Because often, just the act of speaking to the feeling will help it become more specific. The subconscious will start to show you what's underneath the general anxiety. But you have to begin. You have to open the door to the conversation. Once you've named the fear, you're going to ask one simple question, and this question is the key that unlocks everything. You're going to ask, "What are you trying to protect me from?" Or you can ask, "What do you want me to know?" Or, "What are you afraid will happen if I don't listen to you?" The exact wording doesn't matter as much as the spirit of the question. You're approaching the fear with genuine curiosity, rather than hostility. You're treating it as if it has valuable information rather than as if it's just irrational nonsense. And then, after you ask the question, you wait. This is where most people give up too soon. They ask the question, they wait 3 seconds, they don't hear anything, and they conclude it doesn't work. But that's not how the subconscious mind communicates. It doesn't usually give you an immediate verbal answer like you're having a conversation with another person. It communicates through images, through memories, through sensations, through subtle knowings that arise from a deeper place than conscious thought. So you ask the question, and then you sit in the silence. You wait. You listen, not with your ears, but with your whole being. And you stay open to whatever arises. Maybe a memory surfaces, like it did for me with the public speaking, like it did for David with his father's voice. Maybe you suddenly remember something that happened when you were a child that you haven't thought about in years. Maybe you get a physical sensation, a tightness in your chest, a heaviness in your stomach, and that sensation carries information. Maybe you just get a sense, a knowing, an understanding of what the fear is really about. And maybe, sometimes, you don't get anything at all in that moment. And that's okay too, because you've planted a seed, you've opened a door, and the answer might come later, while you're doing the dishes, or driving, or lying in bed. The subconscious will respond in its own time. But let's say you do get a response. Let's say you ask, "What are you trying to protect me from?" And suddenly you understand that your fear of putting yourself out there, your fear of pursuing your dream, isn't really about the dream itself. It's about the possibility of trying your best and still failing, which would confirm the deepest fear you have about yourself, that you're not good enough, that you don't have what it takes, that you're inherently flawed or broken. That's the real fear underneath the surface fear. And once you see that, once you hear that, you can respond to it. And this is the fourth step in the practice. You respond with compassion. You speak back to the fear, as if you're speaking to a frightened child. Because in many ways you are. The part of you that's afraid is often a younger version of yourself, a part that got hurt or scared or overwhelmed at some point and is still trying to keep you safe using the only strategies it knew back then. So you speak gently. You speak with understanding. You might say something like, "Thank you for trying to protect me. I know you're afraid that if I try and fail, it will prove that I'm not good enough." But that's not true. Failure doesn't mean I'm not good enough. It means I tried something that didn't work, and I learned something, and I can try again. My worth isn't determined by my success. My worth is inherent. It exists simply because I exist. And I'm going to pursue this dream because it matters to me. Not because I need to prove anything to anyone. You can come along if you need to. I'm not going to abandon you. But you're not in charge of this decision anymore. I am. And when you speak to your fear this way, something profound happens. The fear doesn't necessarily disappear instantly, but its grip loosens. Because you've changed the entire dynamic. Instead of being at war with your fear, you've made peace with it. Instead of trying to eliminate it, you've integrated it. You've acknowledged it, you've understood it, and you've shown it that there's another way forward. And over time, as you continue this practice, the fear becomes less and less reactive. It learns that it doesn't have to shout to be heard. It learns that you're paying attention. And paradoxically, once it knows you're paying attention, it can relax. It can trust you to make good decisions. It doesn't have to hijack your nervous system every time you approach something that feels risky. This is the practice. Name the fear. Ask what it's trying to protect you from. Listen for the response. And respond with compassion and clarity. It sounds simple, and it is simple. But don't mistake simplicity for weakness. This is one of the most powerful practices you can engage in for transforming your relationship with fear. And the more you do it, the more skilled you become at it. The first few times might feel awkward or forced. You might feel like you're just talking to yourself. But stick with it. Because what you're actually doing is training your nervous system to respond differently. You're creating new neural pathways. You're teaching your subconscious that fear doesn't have to be a tyrant. It can be an advisor, a messenger, a part of you that has information but doesn't control you. And here's what I want you to understand about this practice at a deeper level. What you're really doing when you speak to your fear is activating the law of inner light. And this law is fundamental to how consciousness works. Consciousness is light. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Consciousness is literally the capacity to illuminate, to make visible, to bring into awareness what was hidden. And the subconscious is the realm of the hidden, the realm of the dark, the realm of the unknown. Fear lives in the subconscious. It operates in the dark corners of your mind, where you're not looking, where you're not paying attention. And as long as it stays there, as long as it remains unconscious, it has tremendous power over you. It can pull your strings. It can make you avoid things you want to pursue. It can make you react in ways that don't serve you. It can run your life from behind the scenes. But the moment you shine the light of your conscious awareness on that fear, The moment you bring it out of the darkness and into the light, it changes. Not because the light fights the darkness, not because consciousness battles fear, but because darkness is simply the absence of light. And when light is present, darkness ceases to exist. This is not a metaphor. This is how it actually works. Fear cannot survive in the full light of conscious awareness. It can only survive in the shadows, in the unexamined places, in the thoughts and beliefs and memories that you refuse to look at directly. So when you practice speaking to your fear, you're not just using a psychological technique. You're applying a fundamental spiritual law. You're bringing light to darkness. You're bringing consciousness to unconsciousness. And in that moment of illumination, transformation becomes possible. Because once you see something clearly, once you understand it, once you know where it came from and why it's there, you can choose how to respond to it. You're no longer at its mercy. You're no longer controlled by it. You're free. And freedom doesn't mean you'll never feel fear again. Let me be very clear about this. I'm not promising you that if you do this practice, you'll become some kind of fearless superhuman who never feels afraid of anything. That's not realistic, and that's not even desirable. Fear is a natural human emotion. It's part of your survival system. There are times when fear is appropriate, when it's giving you useful information, when it's protecting you from actual danger. If you're standing at the edge of a cliff and you feel fear, that's good. That fear is keeping you from doing something stupid. If you're about to sign a contract and you feel a sense of unease, that fear might be pointing to something in the contract that you need to examine more carefully. Fear itself isn't the problem. The problem is unconscious fear. The problem is fear that's running on autopilot, fear that's controlling you without your awareness, fear that's based on old information and old wounds, and old beliefs that are no longer relevant to your current situation. That's the fear that needs to be brought into the light. That's the fear that needs to be spoken to. And when you do this work consistently, when you make it a practice to bring awareness to your fears, rather than running from them or being controlled by them, something beautiful happens. You develop what I call discernment. You start to be able to tell the difference between useful fear and useless fear, between fear that's protecting you and fear that's limiting you, between fear that's based on present reality and fear that's based on past trauma. And once you have that discernment, once you can tell the difference, you can make conscious choices. You can listen to the fear that's giving you valuable information and ignore the fear that's just noise. You can move forward with your life, with your dreams, with your purpose, even when there's fear present. Because you're not trying to be fearless. You're trying to be conscious. You're trying to be awake. You're trying to live from a place of clarity rather than confusion, from a place of choice rather than compulsion. This is what true courage looks like. It's not the absence of fear. It's the willingness to feel fear and still act in alignment with your values, your vision, your truth. It's the willingness to be afraid and to have a conversation with that fear and to move forward anyway. Not because you're ignoring the fear, but because you've listened to it, you've understood it, and you've decided that it's not in charge of your life. You are. Let me share something else with you that I've discovered in my years of working with this principle. There's a paradox at the heart of fear. The more you try to avoid it, the stronger it becomes. The more you run from it, the more it chases you. The more you try to suppress it or deny it or pretend it's not there, the more power it has over you. But the moment you turn toward it, the moment you're willing to face it directly, it begins to lose its power. Not because you've defeated it, not because you've conquered it, but because you've changed your relationship to it. You've stopped being its victim and started being its observer. This is what I mean when I say fear cannot exist in the presence of conscious awareness. Fear thrives on unconsciousness. It needs you to be asleep, to be on autopilot, to be lost in your thoughts and reactions. But when you wake up, when you bring conscious awareness to what's happening, when you say, I see you, fear, I know what you're doing, and I'm choosing differently, in that moment you take your power back. Not from the fear. The fear never had your power. You gave it your power by refusing to look at it, and you take it back, simply by choosing to see what's really there. This is the gift of the law of inner light. It gives you a way to work with fear that doesn't require you to be superhuman. It doesn't require you to never feel afraid. It doesn't require you to positive think your way out of every anxious moment. It simply requires you to be willing to bring light to darkness, to bring consciousness to unconsciousness, to bring awareness to what has been hidden. And the beautiful thing is, you already have everything you need to do this. You don't need special training. You don't need years of therapy. You don't need a guru, or a teacher, or a guide. You have the light within you already. It's the light of your own conscious awareness. And all you need to do is remember to turn it on. So let me give you one more piece of this puzzle, because I want you to understand not just how to do this practice, but why it works at the deepest level. There's a principle that I've been teaching for many years, and it's this. What you are aware of, you can work with. What you're not aware of, works you. Let me say that again. What you are aware of, you can work with. What you're not aware of works you. This is the key to understanding why consciousness, why awareness, why light is so powerful when it comes to fear. When a fear is unconscious, when it's operating below the level of your awareness, it's in control. It's making decisions for you. It's filtering your perception. It's limiting your choices. It's running the show. And you don't even know it's happening. You just experience the results, the avoidance, the anxiety, the self-sabotage, the patterns that keep repeating no matter how hard you try to change them. And you think that's just who you are. You think that's your personality, your character, your fate. But it's not. It's just an unconscious program running in the background. But the moment you bring awareness to that program, the moment you shine light on it and see it clearly, it loses its automatic power. It can no longer operate unconsciously. It can no longer make decisions for you without your knowledge. Because now you know it's there. Now you can see it. And once you can see it, you can work with it. You can question it. You can update it. You can choose whether to listen to it or not. You're no longer at its mercy, you're in the driver's seat. This is what empowerment actually means. Not that you're never afraid. Not that you're always confident. Not that life is always easy. But that you're conscious. You're aware. You're awake. And from that place of wakefulness, you can respond to life skillfully rather than just reacting to it blindly. And that makes all the difference. So I want you to think about your life right now. I want you to think about the fears that are running in the background. The ones you don't usually look at directly. The ones you've been avoiding, or denying, or trying to outrun. Maybe it's a fear about money. Maybe it's a fear about your health. Maybe it's a fear about being alone, or being rejected, or being seen for who you really are. Maybe it's a fear that you're not good enough, that you're an imposter, that eventually everyone will figure out that you don't have it all together. Whatever it is, I want you to know that that fear doesn't have to control your life. It's been controlling your life because it's been unconscious, because you haven't been willing to look at it directly. But that can change right now, today. In this moment, all it takes is the willingness to turn on the light, the willingness to say, I'm ready to see what I've been afraid to see. I'm ready to hear what I've been afraid to hear. I'm ready to bring awareness to what's been hidden. And I promise you, when you do that, when you take that step, you will discover that the monster in the dark is nowhere near as terrifying as you thought it was. You'll discover that fear is just a part of you that's been trying to get your attention, trying to tell you something, trying to protect you using the only methods it knows. And once you listen to it, once you understand it, once you respond to it with compassion and clarity, it can finally relax. It can stop fighting you, and you can move forward with your life from a place of wholeness rather than division. This is the journey I'm inviting you on. Not a journey of overcoming or conquering or eliminating fear, but a journey of integration. A journey of bringing all the parts of yourself into the light. A journey of becoming whole. And it starts with one simple practice. Speak to your fear. Give it a voice. Let it tell you what it needs you to know. And then, from a place of conscious awareness, make your choice about how you want to move forward. That's all it takes. That's the practice. That's the law of inner light in action. And I want you to know that you can do this. I don't care how long you've been afraid. I don't care how deeply entrenched your anxiety has been. I don't care what you've tried in the past that hasn't worked. This is different. This isn't about trying to fix yourself or change yourself or become someone you're not. This is about seeing yourself clearly. And when you see yourself clearly, when you bring light to all the hidden corners, transformation happens naturally. Not because you're forcing it, but because light and darkness can't coexist. When the light comes on, the shadows disappear. Not because they were defeated, but because they were never really there in the way you thought they were. They were just the absence of light. And now the light is present. So as we come to the close of our time together, I want to leave you with this understanding. Your fear is not your enemy. It never was. It's been trying to help you, trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe. The problem has been that it's been using outdated information and operating unconsciously. But now you have a tool. Now you have a practice. Now you know how to bring the light of your conscious awareness to the darkness of unconscious fear. And when you do that consistently, when you make it a regular practice to speak to your fears instead of running from them, you'll find that your whole relationship with fear transforms. You'll find that you can feel afraid and still take action. You'll find that anxiety doesn't have to paralyze you. You'll find that doubt doesn't have to stop you. Because you'll understand that these are just voices in a conversation, not commandments you have to obey. You'll understand that you are the one who's listening to the voices. You are the one who has the final say. You are the light that illuminates all of it. And that light, that consciousness, that awareness, that's who you really are. Not the fear, not the anxiety, not the doubt. Those are just experiences passing through the space of your awareness. But the awareness itself, the consciousness that's watching it all, that's listening to it all, that's choosing how to respond to it all, that's you. That's your true nature. That's the inner light that's been there all along. And when you remember that, when you connect with that truth, everything changes. Because you realize that you're not a victim of your fears. You're not powerless in the face of anxiety. You're not broken, or damaged, or flawed. You're just a human being with a nervous system that's been conditioned by past experiences, and now you have the tools to recondition that nervous system. You have the ability to bring light to darkness. You have the capacity to transform your relationship with fear, and that capacity has been with you all along. You just needed to remember how to use it. So, here's what I want you to do. After we finish here, I want you to find a quiet space, a private moment, and I want you to try this practice, just once. Don't judge it. Don't analyze it. Don't decide in advance whether it's going to work or not. Just try it. Sit down, take a few deep breaths, and speak to whatever fear is most present for you right now. Name it out loud. Ask it what it's trying to protect you from. Listen for the response. And respond with compassion. That's it. That's all I'm asking you to do. Give it 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes of your life to see if this principle works for you. Because I can talk about this all day. I can explain the theory. I can share the stories. I can teach the concepts. But none of that matters unless you actually experience it for yourself. And here's what I know. If you do try this, if you actually engage with this practice with genuine openness and curiosity, something will shift. Maybe it'll be a big shift. Maybe it'll be a subtle one. But something will be different. Because you'll have done something you've probably never done before. You'll have turned toward your fear instead of away from it. You'll have brought light to what's been hiding in darkness. And that simple act of turning, that simple act of illuminating, that's the beginning of freedom. That's the beginning of transformation. That's the beginning of a new relationship with yourself, where fear doesn't have to be the enemy, where anxiety doesn't have to be a life sentence, where you can finally experience what it's like to live from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious reaction. And I want to tell you something else. You're not alone in this. Everyone, and I mean everyone, deals with fear. Everyone has anxieties, doubts, worries that keep them up at night. Everyone has parts of themselves they're afraid to look at, fears they're trying to avoid, shadows they're hoping will just go away on their own. You're not broken because you feel fear. You're not weak because you struggle with anxiety. You're human. And the human experience includes fear, but it also includes the capacity for conscious awareness. It also includes the ability to bring light to darkness. It also includes the possibility of transformation. So if this message has resonated with you, if something in what I've shared today has touched something true in you, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what fear you're ready to speak to, not for me, for you. Because the act of writing it down, the act of naming it publicly, that's the first step in bringing it into the light. And I'll be reading every comment. I'll be witnessing your courage. I'll be holding space for your journey. Because we're in this together. We're all walking each other home to that place of inner light, that place of conscious awareness, that place where fear can be felt but doesn't have to be obeyed. And if this video has helped you, if you've learned something that might change how you relate to your fear, hit that like button. Not because I need the validation, but because it helps this message reach other people who are struggling, who are suffering, who are trapped in their own dark rooms and don't know that there's a door, that there's a light, that there's a way out. Your like might be what puts this video in front of someone who desperately needs to hear it. And that matters. That makes a difference. And if you want more of this kind of teaching, if you want to keep exploring these principles of consciousness and transformation, if you want to keep learning how to work with your mind in a way that actually produces real change, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore, so much more to understand, so much more depth to plumb when it comes to the incredible power of your own awareness. But for now, for this moment, I want to leave you with this final thought. You are not broken. You've just been operating in the dark. You're not weak. You've just been fighting shadows. And you're not your fear. You are the light that reveals it, dissolves it, and remembers its own power. Say that to yourself. Write it down somewhere you'll see it every day. Whisper it when the 3 a.m. thoughts come, when the anxiety tries to take over, when the doubt creeps in. You are not broken. You've just been operating in the dark. You're not weak. You've just been fighting shadows. And you're not your fear. You are the light that reveals it, dissolves it, and remembers its own power. Remember that truth. Live from that truth. And watch how everything in your life begins to shift. Because when you understand the law of inner light, when you understand that consciousness itself is the answer to unconscious fear, you gain access to a power that nothing can take away from you. It's not a power you have to earn, or deserve, or become worthy of. It's a power you already possess. It's who you already are. You just forgot for a while, but now you're remembering. Now the light is coming back on. Now you're waking up. And the fear that seems so powerful, so overwhelming, so insurmountable, it's already beginning to dissolve. Not because you're fighting it, not because you're trying to get rid of it, but because you've finally turned toward it. You've finally spoken to it. You've finally brought it into the light. And in the light, fear loses its monstrous shape. It becomes what it always was, just a voice carrying old information, just a messenger trying to protect you, just a part of you that needed to be seen and heard and held with compassion. So go now. Go speak to your fear. Give it the attention it's been crying out for. Listen to what it has to tell you. And then from a place of conscious awareness, make your choice. Choose to move forward. Choose to take the risk. Choose to pursue the dream. Choose to be vulnerable. Choose to be seen. Choose to live fully, even with the fear present. Because that's what it means to be awake. That's what it means to be free. That's what it means to embody the law of inner light. And remember, the light was always inside you. You just forgot to turn it on. Now you know how. Now you have the key. Now you're ready. Go speak to your fear. And watch it disappear. Now, before I let you go, I want to take you deeper into something that might change the way you see, not just fear, but your entire life. Because what we've been talking about today isn't just about managing anxiety or feeling a little bit better. This is about understanding a fundamental truth about reality itself. And that truth is this. You are not living in a world that's happening to you. You're living in a world that's happening through you. Your consciousness, your awareness, your inner light that's not just observing reality, it's creating it. And when you understand that, when you really get that at a cellular level, everything transforms. Let me explain what I mean. Most people walk through life believing that they're separate from the world around them. They think they're a person inside a body, looking out at an external world that exists independently of them. And from that perspective, fear makes perfect sense, because if you're separate from the world, if you're this small, vulnerable thing in a vast, unpredictable universe, then of course you should be afraid. Of course you should be worried about what might happen to you. Of course you should be on guard, protecting yourself, trying to control everything you can control so that you stay safe. But what if that entire worldview is wrong? What if you're not separate from the world at all? What if your consciousness and the reality you experience are not two different things but two aspects of the same thing? What if the world you see is not something external that you're observing, but something internal that you're projecting? This isn't New Age fantasy. This is what quantum physics has been showing us for 100 years. The observer affects the observed. Consciousness collapses the wave function. Reality doesn't exist independent of the one who's perceiving it. But we don't need to get lost in the science. We can understand this truth through direct experience. Think about your dreams for a moment. When you're dreaming, the dream world feels completely real, doesn't it? You're in a place, there are other people, things are happening, and it all seems solid and objective. But when you wake up, you realize that the entire dream world was being generated by your own mind. The people in your dream, the places, the events, none of it was external. It was all internal. It was all arising within your consciousness. And here's the profound part. You were not separate from the dream. You were the dreamer and the dream simultaneously. Now, the mystics and sages throughout history have been telling us that waking life is exactly the same. That what we call reality is also a dream, a projection of consciousness, and we are not separate from it. We are the dreamer dreaming this dream into existence moment by moment. And if that's true, and I'm telling you it is true, then fear takes on a completely different meaning, because if you're dreaming the world into existence, then the things you fear are also part of your dream. They're not external threats attacking you from the outside. They're internal creations arising from within your own consciousness. And that means you have far more power over them than you ever imagined. This is why speaking to your fear works so profoundly. Because when you speak to your fear, you're not just having a psychological conversation. You're engaging with the creative power of your own consciousness. You're entering into dialogue with the part of you that's generating the fear experience. And when you do that with awareness, with intention, with the light of consciousness fully present, you can literally reshape that experience. You can change the dream. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. I knew a woman, let's call her Sarah, who had been suffering from chronic anxiety for years. She was afraid of everything. Afraid to drive on the highway. Afraid to speak up in meetings at work. Afraid to go to social gatherings. Afraid to be alone. Her life had become smaller and smaller as the fear grew larger and larger. She had tried medication, which helped a little but made her feel numb. She had tried therapy, which gave her some coping strategies but didn't address the root of the problem. She had tried meditation, which calmed her temporarily, but the anxiety always came back. Then she came across this teaching about speaking to fear, about the law of inner light. And at first, like many people, she was skeptical. It seemed too simple, too strange. How could just talking to her anxiety possibly help when nothing else had worked? But she was desperate enough to try anything. So one evening, when the anxiety was particularly bad, when she could feel it like a weight on her chest and her thoughts were spiraling into panic, she sat down and did the practice. She spoke out loud to her anxiety. She said, "Anxiety, I know you're here. I feel you. And I want to understand you. What are you trying to protect me from?" And then something unexpected happened. A memory surfaced that she hadn't thought about in decades. She was 5 years old, and her parents were fighting. Not just arguing, screaming at each other, throwing things, completely out of control. And little Sarah was hiding in her closet, terrified, covering her ears, trying to make herself as small as possible. And in that moment, her young mind made a decision. The world is dangerous. People are unpredictable. If I let my guard down, something terrible will happen. I need to stay alert. I need to watch for danger at all times. I need to be ready. That decision, made by a 5-year-old in a moment of terror, had been running Sarah's nervous system for 40 years. It had become her operating system, her default setting, her unconscious filter for perceiving reality, and because it was unconscious, because she had never examined it, never questioned it, never brought it into the light, it had power over her. It kept her in a constant state of hypervigilance. It interpreted every uncertain situation as dangerous. It kept her small and safe and utterly miserable. But when she spoke to her anxiety, and that memory surfaced, everything changed. Because now she could see where the anxiety was coming from. She could see that it wasn't responding to her present reality. She wasn't 5 years old anymore. She wasn't trapped in a house with fighting parents. She was a grown woman in control of her own life. The anxiety was responding to the past. It was running an old program based on outdated information. And once she saw that clearly, once she brought the light of her conscious awareness to that 5-year-old decision, she could speak to it differently. She could say, I see you, little one. I understand why you're so afraid. What you witnessed was scary. It made sense for you to decide that the world was dangerous and you needed to protect yourself. But that's not where we are anymore. We're safe now. We're grown up now. We have choices now. We can leave situations that don't feel good. We can speak up for ourselves. We can take care of ourselves. You don't have to carry that fear anymore. I've got us. You can rest now. And something shifted in that moment. Something deep and fundamental. The anxiety didn't vanish instantly. Patterns that have been running for 40 years don't disappear overnight. But the grip loosened. The intensity decreased. And over the following weeks and months, as Sarah continued to practice speaking to her fear, as she continued to bring light to the dark corners of her subconscious, the anxiety gradually transformed. It went from being a constant, overwhelming presence to being an occasional visitor. And when it did show up, she knew how to work with it. She knew it was just that 5-year-old part of her that needed reassurance. She knew it wasn't telling her the truth about her present reality. She knew she could feel the fear and still move forward with her life. Sarah's story illustrates something crucial about the law of inner light. When you bring conscious awareness to unconscious patterns, you don't just understand them intellectually. You actually change them at the level of the nervous system. You rewire the brain. You update the subconscious programming. And you do this not through force or willpower, or positive thinking alone, but through the simple act of seeing clearly. Because consciousness itself is transformative. Light itself is healing. When you shine awareness on darkness, the darkness doesn't fight back. It simply dissolves. It reveals itself to be empty, to be nothing more than the absence of light. This is why I keep emphasizing that this practice isn't about fighting fear or trying to get rid of it. It's about illuminating it. It's about bringing it into full view, so you can see what it actually is rather than what you're afraid it might be. And what you'll discover, every single time, is that the fear is not what you thought it was. It's not a monster. It's not a curse. It's not evidence of your weakness or brokenness. It's a message from your past, from a younger version of you, from a protective mechanism that was trying to help but didn't have all the information. And when you understand that, when you see that clearly, you can respond with compassion instead of resistance. You can integrate instead of fighting. You can heal instead of suppressing. Now I want to talk about something that might challenge you a bit, because there's a layer to this that goes even deeper than what we've discussed so far. And it's this. Most of the fears that control your life aren't even your own. They're inherited. They're absorbed. They're picked up from your family, your culture, your society, your media, your environment. You're carrying fears that belong to your mother, your father, your grandparents, your ancestors going back generations. You're carrying collective fears that have been passed down through human consciousness for thousands of years. Fear of scarcity, fear of death, fear of rejection from the tribe, fear of the unknown. These fears are woven into the fabric of human experience, and you absorb them before you even had the capacity to question whether they were true. Think about it. When you were born, you were fearless. You were pure consciousness, pure presence, pure light. You didn't know about danger or failure or loss. You didn't know you were supposed to be afraid of anything. But then you started learning. You learned from your parents' worried faces when you got too close to the stairs. You learned from the fear in their voices when they warned you about strangers. You learned from watching them worry about money, about health, about what other people thought. And you absorbed all of that. You took it into your nervous system. You made it yours, even though it wasn't yours to begin with. And then you went to school, and you learned more fears. Fear of being wrong, fear of being laughed at, fear of not being smart enough or good enough or popular enough. And you watched the news. And you learned to be afraid of terrorism and crime and economic collapse and disease. And you scrolled through social media, and you learned to be afraid that you're not successful enough, not attractive enough, not living your best life. Layer upon layer of fear, most of which has nothing to do with your actual lived experience, most of which is just absorbed from the collective anxiety of humanity. So when you sit down to speak to your fear, when you ask what it's trying to protect you from, don't be surprised if what comes up has nothing to do with you personally. Don't be surprised if you're carrying your mother's fear of abandonment, your father's fear of failure, your grandmother's fear of poverty, your culture's fear of being different. These inherited fears are often the hardest to recognize because they feel so natural, so much like just the way things are. But they're not. They're learned. They're absorbed. And what has been learned can be unlearned. What has been absorbed can be released. This is where the practice of speaking to your fear becomes truly revolutionary. Because when you bring conscious awareness to these inherited patterns, when you shine light on fears that don't even belong to you, you're not just healing yourself, you're healing your lineage. You're healing the collective. You're breaking chains that have been passed down through generations. And you're ensuring that these fears don't get passed on to the next generation. You're stopping the transmission. You're ending the cycle. I'll give you another example. There was a man I worked with, we'll call him Michael, who came to me because he was paralyzed around money. He couldn't seem to earn more than a certain amount. And whenever he did start to make more money, something would happen to take it away. An unexpected expense. A bad investment. A business deal that fell through. It was like he had an invisible ceiling on his financial success. And this was devastating to him because he wanted to provide for his family. He wanted to have security. He wanted to feel abundant. But no matter what he tried, the pattern kept repeating. When we did the work of speaking to his fear around money, what surfaced was shocking. He got an image of his grandfather during the Great Depression. His grandfather had lost everything: his business, his savings, his home. The family had nearly starved. And the trauma of that experience had been so profound that it got encoded into the family system. Michael's father had grown up in a household where money was scarce and fear around finances was constant. And even though Michael's father had eventually become financially stable, he carried that Depression-era fear with him. He passed it on to Michael, not through words, but through energy, through unspoken anxiety, through a nervous system that was always braced for collapse. And Michael had inherited that fear. He was living as if the Great Depression was still happening, as if scarcity was just around the corner, as if it was dangerous to have too much because it could all be taken away. And his subconscious was actually creating that reality, was actually sabotaging his success, was actually manifesting the very scarcity it feared. Because that's what the subconscious does. It doesn't argue with your beliefs. It doesn't question your assumptions. It just says, okay, if you believe money isn't safe, I'll make sure you don't have too much of it. I'll protect you from the danger of abundance. But once Michael saw this pattern clearly, once he understood that he was carrying his grandfather's trauma, he could release it. He could say, "Grandfather, I honor your struggle. I honor what you went through. But that was your experience, not mine. I'm living in a different time, in a different circumstance, in a different reality. And I'm choosing to believe something different. I'm choosing to believe that abundance is safe, that money can flow, that I can be financially successful, without disaster following. And over time, as he continued to work with this awareness, the pattern broke. Money started to flow more easily. Opportunities opened up. The invisible ceiling dissolved. Not because he worked harder, or got smarter, or found some secret strategy, but because he changed the unconscious belief that was creating his reality. This is the power of bringing light to inherited fears. You don't just change your own life. You change the trajectory of your entire lineage. You become a pattern breaker. You become a cycle ender. You become the one who says, "This stops with me. This fear, this trauma, this limitation, it ends here. I'm not passing it on." And there is no more sacred work than that. So as you practice speaking to your fear, as you bring light to the dark corners of your subconscious, pay attention to what comes up. Ask yourself, is this fear really mine? Or did I inherit it? Did I absorb it? Did I learn it? And if it's not truly yours, if it's something you picked up from someone else, you can give it back. Not with anger or blame, but with love and understanding. You can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me. Thank you for thinking this fear would keep me safe. But I don't need it. I release it back to where it came from, and I choose something different for myself." Now let me speak to something that might be happening for some of you right now. You might be listening to all of this and thinking, "This sounds good in theory, Joseph, but my fear is too big. My anxiety is too overwhelming. My trauma is too deep. This simple practice of talking to my fear, it can't possibly be enough to heal what I'm dealing with." And I want to acknowledge that, if that's what you're thinking, I understand. I really do. Some of you have been through things that were genuinely traumatic. Some of you are carrying wounds that are profound. And I'm not suggesting that this practice is a replacement for professional help, for therapy, for medical treatment when it's needed. But what I am saying is this: no matter how deep your fear, no matter how overwhelming your anxiety, no matter how profound your trauma, the law of inner light still applies. Consciousness still has the power to transform unconsciousness. Awareness still has the power to heal what has been hidden. And you have that consciousness. You have that awareness. You have that light. It's not something you need to earn, or develop, or become worthy of. It's what you are. It's your fundamental nature. And the practice of speaking to your fear is simply a way of accessing that light, of remembering that power, of bringing it to bear on the patterns that have been running your life. You don't have to do this perfectly. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to have some profound healing experience every time you sit down to speak to your fear. Sometimes the practice will feel powerful and transformative. Sometimes it will feel awkward, and nothing much will happen. Sometimes you'll get insights that shake your world. Sometimes you'll just sit there feeling silly. All of that is okay. All of that is part of the process. Because what you're doing, underneath all the surface experiences, is training your nervous system to turn toward difficulty instead of away from it. You're building the muscle of conscious awareness. You're strengthening your capacity to be present with what is, rather than lost in what you're afraid might be. And that capacity, that strength, that presence, that's what transforms your life. Let me tell you something else that's important to understand. This work, this practice of bringing light to fear, it's not linear. It's not like you do it once and you're healed forever. It's not like you work through one fear and then you're done and you never feel afraid again. Healing is a spiral. You work with a fear, you bring light to it, you gain understanding, you feel some relief. And then, a few weeks or months later, that same fear might come back up again, but from a different angle, at a deeper level, with more complexity. And that doesn't mean you failed. That doesn't mean the practice didn't work. It means you're ready for the next layer. It means your consciousness is expanding and you're able to see more, hold more, heal more. Think of it like peeling an onion. You peel away one layer, and there's another layer underneath. You peel away that layer and there's another one. And yes, sometimes that can feel frustrating. Sometimes you want to just be done, to be healed, to be free of the fear once and for all. But that's not how consciousness works. Consciousness is infinite. There's always more depth to explore, more shadows to illuminate, more understanding to gain. And that's not a bug. It's a feature. That's not a problem. It's an opportunity. Every time a fear comes back up, it's an invitation to go deeper, to bring more light, to expand your awareness even further. So if you do this practice, and a fear resolves, and then later it comes back, don't be discouraged. Welcome it. Say, you're back. There must be something more you need to show me. Something deeper I'm ready to see now that I wasn't ready to see before. And approach it with that same curiosity, that same willingness to listen, that same commitment to bringing light to darkness, because that's the journey. That's the path. That's what it means to wake up, to become conscious, to live from your inner light. And here's something beautiful that happens as you continue this practice over time. You start to develop a different relationship not just with fear, but with all of your emotions, all of your experiences, all of the contents of your consciousness. You start to see that nothing that arises within you is your enemy. Nothing needs to be suppressed or denied or pushed away. Everything that comes up, every fear, every doubt, every difficult emotion, is just a messenger. It's just information. It's just energy moving through the field of your awareness. And your job isn't to control it or fix it or make it go away. Your job is simply to be present with it, to bring light to it, to see it clearly. This is what the mystics mean when they talk about equanimity, about non-attachment, about being in the world but not of it. They're not talking about becoming cold or indifferent or disconnected. They're talking about developing the capacity to be fully present with whatever arises, without being controlled by it, without being identified with it, without believing that what you're experiencing in this moment defines who you are. You can feel fear without being afraid. You can experience anxiety without being anxious. You can notice doubt without being doubtful. Because you are not the contents of your consciousness. You are the consciousness itself. You are the space in which all of these experiences arise and pass away. You are the light that illuminates them all. And when you really get that, when that truth becomes lived experience, and not just a concept, everything changes. Life doesn't become perfect. You don't stop having challenges or difficulties, or moments of fear, but you stop suffering from them in the same way, because suffering is not caused by fear itself. Suffering is caused by resistance to fear, by identification with fear, by believing that the fear is who you are and that it's going to last forever. But when you understand the law of inner light, when you practice bringing awareness to fear instead of resisting it or identifying with it, the suffering dissolves. The fear might still be there, but it's workable. It's manageable. It's just another experience passing through like clouds passing through the sky. Let me share one more story with you before we close, because I think it brings together everything we've been talking about. There was a woman I knew who had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and understandably, she was terrified. She was afraid of the treatments, afraid of the side effects, afraid of dying, afraid of leaving her children, afraid of pain, afraid of the unknown. The fear was so overwhelming that it was almost worse than the illness itself. It consumed her thoughts day and night. It made it impossible for her to be present with her family, to enjoy anything, to find any peace. Someone told her about this practice of speaking to fear, and she decided to try it. She sat down one evening, after her children were asleep, and she spoke out loud to her fear of death. She said, "Fear of dying, I know you're here. You're with me every moment. And I'm listening. What are you trying to tell me? What do you need me to know?" And what came to her was unexpected. The fear wasn't really about death itself. It was about not having lived. It was about all the things she had put off, all the dreams she had postponed, all the love she hadn't expressed, all the experiences she had been waiting for the right time to have. The fear of death was really a fear of unlived life. And once she saw that, once she understood what the fear was actually pointing to, she knew what she needed to do. She couldn't control whether she would survive her illness or not. That was beyond her power. But she could control how she lived the time she had left, whether that was months or years or decades. She could stop postponing. She could start living fully right now. She could express the love she felt. She could have the conversations she'd been avoiding. She could do the things that mattered to her. She could be present with her children, with her husband, with her life as it was in this moment, and so that's what she did. And something remarkable happened. As she started living more fully, as she stopped waiting for the perfect time, and started showing up for her life exactly as it was, the fear began to lose its grip. Not because the medical situation changed that was still uncertain, but because she had changed her relationship with the fear. She had heard its message. She had acted on it. And the fear no longer needed to shout so loudly because she was finally listening. She told me later that her illness, as terrible as it was, had been the greatest teacher of her life. Because it forced her to confront her fear of death, and in confronting that fear, she discovered what it really meant to live. She discovered that life isn't something that happens in the future when everything is perfect. Life is happening right now. And the only thing standing between her and a full experience of that life was her own fear, her own resistance, her own belief that she needed to wait for the right conditions before she could really show up. That woman did survive her illness. By the way, she went through the treatments, they were successful, and she's healthy today. But she's not the same person she was before. She's more alive, more present, more grateful, more willing to take risks and express herself and live fully, because she learned the truth that her fear was trying to teach her all along. That life is precious. That this moment is all we have. That there's no time to waste living in fear of what might happen instead of fully experiencing what is happening. This is what becomes possible when you're willing to speak to your fear, when you're willing to bring light to what's been hiding in darkness. You don't just reduce anxiety or feel a little bit better. You gain access to wisdom. You gain access to truth. You gain access to a fuller, richer, more authentic experience of life. Because your fear, when you're willing to listen to it, when you're willing to understand it, when you're willing to see what it's really trying to show you, your fear is actually trying to lead you home. Home to yourself. Home to your truth. Home to your light. So, I want to leave you with this final understanding. Everything I've shared with you today, everything about the law of inner light, everything about speaking to your fear, all of this comes down to one simple truth. You are not a victim of your fear. You never were. Fear has only ever had the power over you that you gave it by refusing to look at it directly. And that power, that control, that grip, you can take it back anytime you choose. Not by fighting. Not by forcing. Not by pretending the fear isn't there. But by turning toward it. By speaking to it. By bringing the light of your conscious awareness to meet it fully. And when you do that, you discover something extraordinary. You discover that you are so much more than you thought you were. You're not the small, frightened person trying to survive in a dangerous world. You're the vast, luminous consciousness that contains all experiences, all fears, all joys, all sorrows. You're the light itself. You always have been. You just forgot for a while. And your fear, paradoxically, has been trying to remind you. It's been trying to get you to turn inward, to pay attention, to wake up to who you really are. So thank you, fear. Thank you for doing your job. Thank you for trying to keep us safe. We see you now. We understand you now. And we're choosing to move forward from a place of light instead of darkness, from a place of consciousness instead of unconsciousness, from a place of love instead of fear. Not because we've defeated you, but because we've integrated you. Not because we've gotten rid of you, but because we've transformed our relationship with you. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the way home to yourself. And it starts with one simple action. Speak to your fear. Give it a voice. Let it tell you what it needs you to know. And then respond with all the wisdom, all the compassion, all the light that you are. That's it. That's the whole teaching. That's the law of inner light in its purest, simplest form. And now you know. Now you have the key. Now you're ready to step into a new relationship with fear, with yourself, with your life. So go do the practice. Go have the conversation. Go turn on the light. And watch as everything you thought was solid and permanent and unchangeable begins to shift, begins to soften, begins to transform. Because that's what happens when light meets darkness. The darkness doesn't fight back. It doesn't argue, it doesn't resist. It simply reveals itself to have been nothing at all. Just the absence of light, just a shadow, just a story you were telling yourself. And now you're ready to tell a different story. A truer story. A story where you are the light, the fear is the shadow, and love is what remains when you finally stop running and turn around to see what was chasing you all along. Go now. Go speak to your fear. And claim the freedom that has always been yours.